different finishing affect bourbon than whiskey in general? And what do I even mean by finishing? So, as I've discussed in other videos, such as can bourbon be flavored, bourbon whiskey needs to be aged in new American oak barrels by law. So all of the whiskey and distilled product needs to go in new oak barrels. However, after it's been in new American oak barrels, they can finish it in other types of oak barrels or other types of barrels in general. That is called finishing. Hi, I'm Tim from Elma Wine and Liquor. Today we're going to jump into that subject of finishing bourbon and what those different types of barrels do to the product. So to start out with, let's see, I have a couple different pieces of wood. These all come from Maker's Mark Distillery, where we have a process of finishing the bourbon in a barrel with some extra staves added in. So sometimes instead of finishing a bourbon in a whole different barrel, the companies can just add in different staves. You can see here that all of these staves look a little bit different because they're all processed in a little bit different way. There's a French oak that is seared and then infrared toasted. There are some American oak in here as well. Every one of them will have slightly different flavors. And then because some of them are infrared toasted, some of them are actually charred, seared, so all impart different flavors on that finished product. Jumping over to some that are finished in a more traditional way and that's just a full cast, start out with, we have this Penelope bourbon that is finished in rosé casks. So rosé is a wine. And not a lot of rosé is even finished in oak barrels anyway. But what they've done is sourced some rosé barrels from the south of France. The barrel housed some rosé wine for a period of time. That rosé got its flavor from the oak barrels, which is why we age products in oak barrels. But whenever you age a product in an oak barrel, wood is a porous surface. So some of that rosé ends up sticking into that wood, staying in the wood. So this bourbon, after it's aged in new American oak barrels, is finished in a rosé barrel. That provides some sweet candy notes, some fresh fruit notes, berries in particular. Some of the nuances of the rosé wine ends up in the bourbon. Makes it a little bit different. The fruity, especially those light fruity notes, come out pretty heavily in this Penelope. Moving on to Sealbox. This is a straight bourbon finished in Amarana casks. What is an Amarana? It's one of my favorite finishings of late. Amarana is a wood from Brazil. I've been seeing more and more barrel bourbons does an Amarana finish. A couple other producers that have been doing it. Amarana adds an incredible flavor and complexity of like baking spices and sweetness to the bourbon. It's just kind of a really incredible flavor to it. You would think that it had to be additives put into the whiskey, the way that those spices just really pop out of the product here. So Sealbox Amarana finished. Another way that you can change the flavor profile of the bourbon by finishing it in a different type of oak syrup. Another thing to add about this Amarana cask, just to note how powerful it is, this is only aged for 5 days in the Amarana cask. It really just impacts a big flavor on the bourbon. Jumping over to the Thomas Moore, this is finished for a few years in the Chardonnay cask. So again, it starts in new American oak barrels, and then it's finished in a Chardonnay barrel, an oak barrel that was used to age a Chardonnay wine in for a few years, as opposed to just a couple of days on the Amarana cask. A lot of butter, richness, creaminess that Chardonnay wine imparts on this, hint of tropical fruit. So, just, again, adds a little bit different complexity to a straight bourbon that is not finished to the secondary cask. Moving over to what is a very popular bourbon, has been for a few years now, is the Angel's Envy port wine finished bourbon. So, they take a bunch of barrels that have been aged in New American oak, and then they finish them for a few months in used port wine barrels. That port wine, if you've ever had port, is sweet, rich, nutty red wine that's been fortified itself. What that gives this bourbon, that sweet cherry, and nutty flavor, and makes it a little bit more palatable, especially to somebody just getting into bourbon. I see this all the time. This is almost like a gateway bourbon for a lot of people, just because of that little extra sweetness on it from the port finish. Rye. So we have a double rye from High West Distillery out in Utah. This is actually one of our single barrel selections. So what they do is they start with their double rye. They have a column still rye and a pot still rye that both present some unique flavors in and of themselves. And then after they've aged those ryes in New American oak barrels, they finish them in a rum cask. So that rum will add some sweetness to it, some different tropical kind of hints to it as well. Just completely different, kind of helps balance out the spiciness of the rye with that sweetness from the rum. Just a great, well-balanced product. And then the last one in my lineup for today is our Nulu honey finished bourbon. So Nulu stands for New Louisville. It's a neighborhood in Louisville, Kentucky. But this distillery is there. They're using a lot of source bourbon. And so they're getting aged bourbon that's been aged in New American oak barrels. And they're doing a lot of cool stuff with finishing. This honey in particular is outstanding. So you don't really necessarily see a lot of barrel-aged honey out in the market, but it's out there. And a lot of these distilleries do it and then sell the honey in their gift shops. But I was a little skeptical of this one at first, especially because of the extremely high price tag on it, which I guess honey is expensive, and then fill it up in a barrel and then dump it out. I'm sure you're going to lose some to the wood, which is why we like finishing the bourbon in the honey barrels, because a lot of that sticky honey is still left in the barrel where they dump the bourbon in. And what you get is a nice sweetness to that bourbon, but they bottle this at 114 proof. So you get that high alcohol. The sweetness isn't overpowering. It's just it just adds a little bit of ease to the sip. You still get that burn from the alcohol. It just kind of plays very nicely together, back and forth with the alcohol and the honey. Great products from Nulu on that one. So 6 different bourbons or ryes, 6 different finishes to those. They aged in a secondary barrel, which adds different flavor notes, different complexities. That New American oak, that bourbon, whiskey, a lot of ryes are aged in to start with, imparts vanilla, char, some of those traditional notes that we think about, and mellows out the product. But the finishing barrels really add some different complexities, or the finishing staves in the case of Maker's Mark. Really encourage you to pay attention, take a look at those labels as you're reading them, and shopping in the store, see whether it's finished in this particular type of wine or other spirit, and figure out what you like. Play around with it. Enjoy. Hope you liked this video. Hope you found it helpful. Please hit the like and subscribe buttons. Share this with a friend. And leave a comment below. What's the best finishing you've ever had on a whiskey? Look forward to hearing from you. Cheers.